The sky is vast, a canvas of endless blue that we often take for granted. But sometimes, within this serene expanse, stories of unimaginable terror, survival, and mystery unfold. Today, we journey into the heart of 5 shocking airline crashes you've likely never heard about. These aren't the stories that dominate headlines for weeks. These are the forgotten incidents, the near misses, and the baffling disappearances that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about air travel. First, let's travel back to 1989. The date is February 24th. United Airlines Flight 811 is climbing out of Honolulu, bound for Sydney, Australia. The Boeing 747, a giant of the skies, is carrying 337 passengers and 18 crew members. Everything is normal. Passengers are settling in. Cabin crew are preparing for service. Then, at 21 minutes past 1 in the morning, while cruising at 22,000 feet, a deafening explosion rocks the aircraft. A massive section of the forward fuselage on the right side blows out, tearing a hole in the plane large enough to swallow a car. The cabin experiences explosive decompression. The sound is terrifying, a violent rush of wind that rips through the cabin, sucking out loose objects, and tragically, 9 passengers, the pilots, Captain David Cronin and First Officer Al Slater, are thrown into a nightmare scenario. 2 of the plane's 4 engines have failed, damaged by the debris from the very fuselage that just ripped away. They are fighting for control of a crippled giant, a gaping wound in its side, over the dark, unforgiving waters of the Pacific Ocean. The noise is so intense they can barely hear each other. They must shout to communicate. Every instinct tells them this is an impossible situation. Yet, through sheer skill and nerves of steel, they manage to turn the massive jet around. They begin a perilous descent back towards Honolulu, a descent that feels like an eternity. For the passengers who remain, it is minutes of pure terror, clinging to their seats, the wind howling through the torn cabin, staring out into the blackness of the night sky where a wall of their plane used to be. Miraculously, after what must have felt like a lifetime of struggle, the crew lines up the 747 with the runway at Honolulu. They land the aircraft safely. The world would later learn the cause: a faulty cargo door latch mechanism. It was a known issue, but the warnings had not been heeded in time. The survival of 346 people that night was a testament to the crew's incredible airmanship, a story of heroism born from a mechanical failure that should never have happened. Now we move to a different kind of incident, one that involves not a mechanical failure, but a deliberate, chilling act. We go to 1994, to the skies over Russia. Aeroflot Flight 593 is on a routine journey from Moscow to Hong Kong. On board the brand new Airbus A310 is a relief pilot, Yaroslav Kadrinsky, who has brought his 2 children, 16-year-old Yana and 12-year-old Eldar, along for the flight. In a decision that would prove fatal, Captain Kadrinsky invites his children into the cockpit. First, his daughter Yana takes the left-hand seat. She briefly holds the controls, but the autopilot keeps the plane steady. Then, it's Eldar's turn. He sits in his father's chair, excited to feel what it's like to fly a real airliner. He turns the control yoke, just as his sister did. But Eldar applies slightly more force, for a little longer. At 1:55 a.m., something unimaginable happens. Eldar's sustained input on the controls partially disengages the autopilot's aileron control. No one notices. A warning light illuminates, but it's silent and goes unseen by the crew, who are distracted and relaxed. The aircraft, now only partially under autopilot control, begins to bank slowly to the right. The bank becomes steeper and steeper. The pilots don't realize the severity of the situation until the bank angle is over 45 degrees, far beyond normal operating limits. An automated G-force warning finally jolts them into action, but it's too late. The plane enters a steep spiral dive. The forces are so strong that the pilots are pinned to their seats, struggling to regain control. They fight valiantly, even managing to pull the plane out of the initial dive. But their recovery effort is too aggressive. The aircraft stalls, then enters a second, final spin. At 1:58 a.m., Aeroflot 593 impacts the side of a mountain, killing all 75 people on board. A tragic lesson in the unforgiving nature of cockpit protocol. Our third story takes us to the clear skies above San Diego, California, on September 25, 1978. Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 182, a Boeing 727, is on its final approach to Lindbergh Field. The weather is perfect. Visibility is unlimited. In the cockpit, the crew is relaxed, even jovial, discussing their plans for the day. At 9:01 a.m., air traffic control alerts Flight 182 about a small, single-engine Cessna 172 in their vicinity. The PSA crew acknowledges seeing it. "Okay, we've got that other 1200, one of the pilots says, referring to the Cessna's altitude. A moment later they report, "I think he's passed off to our right." They lost sight of it. In a fatal moment of misunderstanding and lost situational awareness, they believed the smaller plane was no longer a threat, but it was. It was directly below and in front of them. The Cessna's pilot was also under the impression he was clear of the jetliner. At 9:01 and 47 seconds, the unthinkable occurs. The right wing of the 727 collides with the Cessna, utterly demolishing the smaller aircraft. The impact tears a massive hole in the PSA jet's wing, rupturing fuel lines and crippling its hydraulic systems. The 727, now a fireball, rolls sharply to the right and plummets towards the ground. Onboard recordings capture the crew's final, desperate seconds. "We're going down, ... This is it," one pilot exclaims. The plane crashes into a residential neighborhood in North Park, San Diego. The impact and subsequent explosion are catastrophic. All 135 people on Flight 182, the 2 people in the Cessna, and 7 people on the ground were killed. It was, at the time, the deadliest air disaster in U.S. history. A horrifying reminder that even in perfect weather, a single moment of lost visual contact can lead to absolute tragedy. Next, we fly to the year 2000, over the Mediterranean Sea. Gulf Air Flight 072, an Airbus A320, is making its approach to Bahrain International Airport after a short flight from Cairo. The flight is at night, but conditions are clear. Captain Ihsan Shakib is at the controls. As the plane nears the airport, something goes wrong with the approach. The aircraft is too high and too fast. Instead of aborting the landing and going around for another attempt, which is standard procedure, the captain inexplicably decides to continue. He pushes the nose down into a steep descent to try and correct his path. The aircraft's sophisticated warning systems begin to scream at him. Sink rate, sink rate. Then, whoop whoop, pull up. The captain seems to suffer from a form of spatial disorientation. He pulls back on the controls, but then, confused by the sensations and alarms, he pushes forward again, sending the plane into a shallow but irreversible dive. The co-pilot repeatedly begs him to pull up, but the captain's actions are erratic. At 7:30 p.m., the Airbus A320 slams into the shallow waters of the Persian Gulf just a few kilometers from the runway. The impact is devastating. All 143 passengers and crew on board perish. The investigation would find no mechanical faults with the aircraft. The crash was attributed to pilot error, a terrifying combination of spatial disorientation and a failure to follow established procedures, turning a perfectly good airplane into a death trap. Finally, we come to a mystery that lingers to this day. In 1999, Egyptair Flight 990, a Boeing 767, departs from New York's JFK Airport, bound for Cairo. On board are 217 people. The flight is routine as it climbs to its cruising altitude over the Atlantic Ocean. The captain leaves the cockpit for a rest break, leaving Relief First Officer Gamal Al-Batouti at the controls. At 1:49 a.m., something highly unusual happens. Flight data recorders show the autopilot is disconnected. A moment later, the aircraft's nose begins to pitch down dramatically. The plane enters a terrifying near-vertical dive, plummeting towards the ocean at nearly the speed of sound. Inside the cockpit, the voice recorder captures Al-Batouti repeating a single phrase, softly at first, then more insistently. In Arabic, he says Tawakkaltu ala Allah, I rely on God. The captain fights his way back into the cockpit. What is this? What is this? He shouts. He pulls back hard on his control column, trying to bring the nose up, but the first officer is doing the opposite, pushing his column forward, keeping the plane in its death dive. The two pilots are literally fighting each other for control of the airplane. For a brief moment, the captain's efforts seem to work, and the plane begins to climb. But the stress on the aircraft is too much. The violent maneuver tears off the left engine. At 1:52 a.m., Egyptair 990 disintegrates and crashes into the Atlantic. The official U.S. investigation concluded the crash was a deliberate act by the Relief First Officer. Egyptian authorities fiercely disputed this, blaming a mechanical failure in the plane's elevator control system. To this day, the true reason for the final, terrifying moments of Flight 990 remains shrouded in controversy and debate, a dark mystery lost to the depths of the ocean. From mechanical failure and human error to terrifying mysteries, these events remind us of the thin line between a routine flight and a fight for survival. The lessons learned from these tragedies have made aviation safer than ever before, but the stories themselves serve as a powerful, humbling reminder of the forces at play, 30,000 feet in the air. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found this exploration compelling, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the world's most fascinating stories. Until next time, fly safe.